Okay, hello lovely students. It's your favorite teacher, Miss H, and today we are going to talk about your writing, ways to step it up. I read a lot of papers. I gave a lot of feedback. I really took my time with them because I know you all took your time with them. And so I really want to give you some feedback so your next papers can be even better. I really liked the papers I read, but there's always room for improvement, and I want you all to keep improving and improving. So we're going to go over a couple of really common mistakes I saw in the papers, and we're going to talk about ways to make it better so you all can get better grades and become better writers in the future. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is introductions and some of the issues I saw with introductions. So one of the biggest issues I saw with people's introductions are the hook. That first part of your intro that is supposed to draw the reader in and make them interested in what you're writing. So remember, a hook can be a quote, definition, question, or a statistic in order to draw your reader in and get them interested in what you're writing. So a lot of people had these great hooks, really great quotes or statistics or questions, but they didn't connect them to the book at all. So remember, your hook needs to connect to the book or whatever we're writing about. Your hook needs to connect to the book. I like that that rhymes, but we might not always be writing a book about a book. We might be writing about something else. So you need to make sure that your hook connects to your topic. So this top paragraph up here is really good. I love this quote. It says, Kwame Ture once said, "I must have more patience with my people. They are recovering from hundreds of years of mistreatment, genocide, and miseducation." The book, The Hate You Give, tackles the mistreatment of Black people in America. The book highlights several issues that affected Black people throughout our nation's history. I love this introduction. The hook is directly connected to the book, to our topic. The hook says mistreatment. The next sentence in the introduction says mistreatment. They're able to directly connect this quote to our book. Let's look at this next one. Meek Mill said, "The odds are against you and they double stacked. Stay woke." The book The Hate You Give deals with issues of police brutality in bad schools. Angie Thomas wrote this book and it's being made into a movie. So I loved this hook, but you see they don't really connect it to the book. Something that we could say instead, are the book The Hate You Give deals with the odds that are double stacked against young Black people in America. There's a way that we can write this to just ensure that we're making a direct link in between our hook right here and the rest of the paragraph. Okay, so it's not hard, just you need to use the same words, but just make sure you're directly connecting your hook to the rest of your introduction. Again, for this one, we could say something like, Meek Mill said the odds are against you and they double stacked. Stay woke. Star, the main character in The Hate You Give, is a young girl who gets woke and is aware of issues going on in society after her best friend is killed by police officers. You see, there's a bunch of ways we could connect this great hook. I love this hook, but it needs to directly connect to the book. Okay, the second big issue I saw in people's papers were having really long thesis statements. You want to keep your thesis statement short and sweet. You want to keep it short and sweet. And by that, I mean it should be one sentence and have, your clear points of evidence, but it doesn't need to give a lot of detail because later on in your body paragraphs is where you'll give a lot of detail. So you can keep your thesis short and sweet, one sentence. It doesn't need to give a lot of detail because you'll do that later in your paper. So this top thesis is a great example. It says, the book, The Hate You Give, highlights issues in society by showing police brutality, racism, and racist stereotypes. Short and sweet. And we can, give more detail about, how Khalil is a victim of police brutality and Haley makes racist comments and Khalil is stereotyped later on in our paper. We don't need to say that right in the thesis statement. Now look at how long this thesis statement is. This looks like it could be a whole paragraph. Some of you wrote these really long thesis statements. So this one says, the book, The Hate U Give, highlights issues in society because Star's best friend Khalil is killed by a police officer even though he's unarmed and not breaking any laws. Star is judged at school and her friend Haley makes racist comments, and Khalil is stereotyped as a drug dealer and gangster just because he's a young black man. Yes, this is all true, but we do not need all this detail in our thesis statement. Keep your thesis statement short and sweet because you'll give all this great detail later on in your paper. Okay, everyone, now we're going to talk about body paragraphs. And the biggest issue I saw in body paragraphs were people not giving sentence starters with their quote. And by that, I mean they just started a sentence with a quotation mark and gave a quote. There was nothing before that. You cannot do that. A sentence can never start with a quotation mark. This is a big issue. I'm very serious about it. I'm going to take off like 10 points if I see this on any papers in the future. This is a big thing and it has to stop. It's just incorrect and it doesn't make any sense. A sentence can never start with just a quotation mark. You always need a sentence starter. You need something that first tells us, okay, you're about to give a quote. Because when you just give a random quote like this and don't say anything, it's very confusing. So this top one is a great example of what you should do in a body paragraph. So it says, this would start, that first sentence is the assertion. It starts, the murder of Khalil in Chapter 2 is an example of one of the societal issues highlighted in Thug. In Chapter 2, Khalil is shot and killed by a police officer. In Chapter 2 of the text, Star watches as Khalil's body jerks, blood splatters from his back, and he lays dead. So do you see? We have a whole bunch of words. We have some words before we give our quote. We tell, okay, where did the quote come from? Chapter 2. And what was happening when the quote, when this quote went on? Well, Star was watching. This was when Star watched when her best friend was killed. So let's look at this one and see how it's different. The first way the author of Thug, Angie Thomas, shows societal issues in the text is when Keen threatens Big Mav. Keen came to Mav looking for Devontae, a young Keen lord who stole money from him. Oh yeah, I know about your problems, Keen says, a large bubbling laugh from him. Where's our sentence starter? Why are we just starting with a quotation mark? You don't tell me at all, okay, this came from the text. You don't give me any introduction to know that this is a quote from the book. So you always need a sentence starter with your quote. You always, always, always need a sentence starter with your quote. Some examples of sentence starters are, in the text it says, on page blank it says, the text highlights, and then you give your quote. You can even start to think about how can you describe what was going on in the book when this quote came. Like how this one up here says, in Chapter 2 of the text, Star watches as, and then it gives your quote. Or a lot of you quoted, when Haley made the really racist fried chicken comment. So instead of just saying in the text it says, you could say, in the text Haley said, or Haley yelled at Star. So think about ways in your sentence starters you can start describing what was going on when that quote was said. But the main thing is you need something before you give a quote. I should never just see a sentence starting with a quotation mark. Again, if I do in your next papers, every time I see that, I'm going to take off 10 points. It's a really big issue. It has to stop. I feel like we've talked about this a lot. There's no reason this should keep continuing. And then the final issue with your quotes, make sure you put your page number in parentheses after the quote and then the period after that. You see how we say our page number right after this quote here, and then we have our period? That's what yours should look like. You see here, there's no page number. We don't know what page we got it from. Nothing. So you need to make sure and put your page number after the quote and then your period. So the period will come after the page number. Make sure the page numbers are in parentheses. Go ahead and do those next 2 questions. Pause this video, do those next 2 questions, fix your error, and then continue on. Okay, everyone, the last thing that we're going to talk about are your conclusions. And everyone's conclusion was pretty good. Remember, the mic drop are those last one or two sentences in your conclusion where you really drop the mic, you end with something powerful, you end with an opinion, a belief, or a recommendation on the topic. So it's that really important, powerful part where you really, you end with a mic drop. You end with something really powerful. You leave your reader shook a little. Remember, your conclusions always need to start with your thesis statement. So you just restate your thesis statement. Your introductions end with your thesis, and your conclusions start with your thesis. So here's the thesis in this conclusion. The book, The Hate U Give, highlights issues in society by showing police brutality, racism, and racist stereotypes. So I start with my thesis. Then I summarize what I've written in my essay. In the book, stars a young black girl. In the book, a young black girl is torn between two worlds: her fancy white suburban school and her black community in Garden Heights. Star is traumatized after seeing her best friend killed by police officers. Star needs to learn to speak out and be herself. Everyone should read this book because it talks about important issues facing our community today. Now let's look at this second conclusion. The book, The Hate U Give, highlights issues in society by showing police brutality, racism, and racist stereotypes. Okay, starts with the thesis, very good. In the book, a young black girl is torn between two worlds: her fancy white suburban school and her black community in Garden Heights. Star is traumatized after seeing her best friend killed by police officers. Okay, great. Summarizes what my essay was about. Let's look at this last part, the mic drop. Right here. I think Star needs to learn to speak out and be herself. In my opinion, everyone should read this book because it talks about important issues facing our community. Remember, I said this. Even though you're giving a recommendation, opinion, or belief, you're not going to say I. You're not going to say I think or in my opinion. I don't want to hear I, me, or my in your paper at all unless it's an essay about you personally. So I don't want to hear I, me, or my in your paper at all unless it's about you personally. So don't say I think Star needs to learn to speak out and be herself. Just say Star needs to learn to speak out and be herself. Don't say, in my opinion, everyone should read this book. Just say, everyone should read this book. And this is because when you're writing, you want to write as if it is fact, as if you are right. You're the expert on this. It's your paper. We know it's your opinion, it's your paper. You don't need to say it. And a lot of people put I, me, and my in their paper, like my paper will be about, or in my paper I wrote about. Yes, we want to upgrade from that. That's kind of how you write when you're young, things like that. But now we want to start writing as if we're the experts. We have the facts. So when you go on and you're writing in 11th and 12th grade and then on to college, if you want to go to college, the I and the my and the me needs to be out. That should not be in your paper at all. Again, unless it's an essay about you. Your homework essay, that's about you. So you'll say I, me, or my. This essay is not about you. It's about the hate you give. So I should not see I, me, or my. Okay, go ahead and finish off the rest of the work. I'm excited to conference with you and continue to make your writing better and better as the year goes on. Be blessed.